Okay, I'm back, and now I want to take a few minutes and explain how these distinctions, the set of, not set of, present in, not present in distinctions, give us this classification of things into primary and secondary substances, and then how that adds up to a treatise that is in some sense directed towards and against Plato. So I gave you these two distinctions just a minute ago, and I said that they cut across each other, and they cut across each other in such a way as to give us four different categories. So let's look briefly at what they are. The most basic fundamental category that they give us is the category of things that are neither said of nor present in anything else. And this is another way to say that these are just entities that are not predicated in anything else at all. That is to say, they're subjects. They're the kinds of entities in which properties and qualities adhere, but they don't adhere in anything else. So Socrates is thinking of concrete particulars, individuals like Socrates, like Felix the cat, like you, like me, like the coffee cup, like the table, things that are hylomorphic compounds in Aristotle's terminology. And as we'll see in a moment, these are the entities that Aristotle identifies with substance, with ousia, in the most basic or fundamental sense. Now, above these particular individuals, we have, roughly speaking, we have qualities that can adhere in the subjects. And some of them are qualities that are universals, and some of them are qualities that are essential universals. And the qualities that are essential universals, Aristotle calls secondary substances. So let's try to make sense of that. What does it mean to say that something is not said of, but that it's present in a subject? Well, to say that it's not said of is to identify it as a particular. And to say that it's present in is to identify it as a quality that's inessential. So to say that something is not said of a subject, but it's present in the subject, is essentially to say that it's a unit property, in some of the philosophical jargon, or perhaps that it's a trope. That is to say, it's a particular instance of a property. So the grayness, the particular bit of grayness that's instantiated by Felix, that's something that's not said of him because it's a particular, and it's something that's present in him because he can lose it and still be Felix. Or the particular bit of mathematical knowledge that Austin instantiates. It's not said of him, it's his knowledge, it's the knowledge he instantiates, and it's present in him because he's still going to be Austin. We hope he doesn't lose his mathematical knowledge, but he'll still be Austin if he does. So this marks out unit properties or tropes, something along those lines, that are inessential. Said of and present in. Perhaps I should write that up here. So down here we've got individuals, individual subjects. Here we've got inessential unit properties, or tropes. What do we have here? To say that something is said of is to say that it's a universal quality that belongs to the subject. To say that it's present in is again to say that it's inessential. So the grayness we talked about. Grayness is a universal that is instantiated by Felix, is something that's said of Felix. He falls into the category of gray things, but it's not essential to him. So this is an inessential, or in Aristotle's terms, an insubstantial universal. Said of, but not present in. This is going to be the category of universals that are essential to the things that to which they belong. So, in the case of Felix, his catness. Oops, before giving an example, I should say what the category is. This is the category of essential universals, or substantial universals in Aristotle's terms. Essential universals. The fact that Felix is a cat is something that can't change if he's going to remain Felix. His catness is a universal that's predicated of him essentially. The fact that he's an animal, the fact that he's an organism. Now, these are the entities that Aristotle calls secondary substances. Why does he call them substances? Well, here we're closer to the sense of substance as essence. He calls them substances because they're qualities that are essential to the things to which they belong. Why are they secondary? Well, they're secondary because they don't have the primacy, the ontological primacy, you might say, of the subjects, the particulars that instantiate them. So these things, these entities that are neither said of nor present in anything else, are not predicated of anything at all, are the things that Aristotle calls primary substances. And he says in the categories that what's most fully I'll just give it to you in his own terms here. What is called substance most fully, primarily, and most of all, is what is neither said of nor in the subject. That is to say, the concrete particulars that we have down here. These are the primary substances. Now, one way to think about the secondary substances is as the species that stand over the primary substances. That is, the universals that inhere in them essentially. And this is more or less where we get our contemporary ideas about a species and genus. So to stick with our example of Felix, if we think of Felix as being right here, we say that Felix, the cat, is a thing that's gray. So that's a universal he instantiates, is grayness. And he's also a cat, he's an animal, he's an organism. His grayness, whether we think of it as the particular grayness he instantiates or the universal he instantiates, is inessential to him. The fact that he's a cat, the fact that he's an animal, the fact that he's an organism, these are all qualities that belong to Felix essentially. And these are also qualities that Aristotle characterizes as species. Eidos is Aristotle's term, and genus, genos, is Aristotle's term. And those terms, species and genus, are co-relative. So if we're thinking of animal is the genus to which cat belongs. But then if we're thinking of organism is a species of the genus, animal is a species of the genus organism. So whether we're talking about the secondary substances as being species or genus, I dropped my chalk, here's another one, as being species or genus, depends on whether we're thinking about them in relationship to the categories above or below them. So why does this add up to an anti-Platonic treatise? Well, as I said in the last in the last short video, you're really not getting your money's worth of this. In the last 5-minute impossibly compressed summary, substance, ousia, is a kind of honorific term in ancient philosophy. Not just any old existing thing counts or qualifies as an ousia or a substance. Ousiae are basic or fundamental. How? Well, there are sort of 3 broad senses in which ousiae, as Aristotle conceives them, are fundamental or basic. If you want to be an ousia, you want to apply for the substance job, you have to be, first of all, you've got to be ontologically basic. What does that mean? Well, actually, I'll just give it to you in Aristotle's own terms. So you've got to be ontologically basic, you've got to be epistemically basic, and you've also got to be permanent in a certain way. You can't be too transient. You have to persist. And in particular, you've got to be the sort of thing that persists through change. Those are roughly senses, very broad abstract senses, in which an entity can be basic. It can be basic in the sense that it persists. Other things that come and go seem less fundamental in that sense. It can be basic in the sense of being something that you have to know in order to know what a thing is, or to know what the world is like. It can be basic in the sense of being that on which other existing things depend for their existence. And so when Aristotle is asking, well, what kinds of things count as ousiae, substances, he's asking the question, roughly, what kinds of things satisfy or meet these conditions? And when he says that a primary substance, individual particulars like you, me, Socrates, the table, are substances in the fullest sense, he thinks they're substances in the fullest sense because they satisfy these criteria. So let me give you his own language here. Ontologically basic. Categories 2b, Aristotle says, if the primary substances did not exist, neither could any of the other things exist. So Socrates is a compound of form and matter. He's a primary substance. In Aristotle's terminology, he's very pale right now because it's been cloudy for weeks on end. If Socrates goes to South Padre Island for spring break and he acquires a tan, so he loses his pallor, and now of course he should be home quarantining in Athens, but if he does go to South Padre Island and he gets the tan, well, he loses a quality and he gains a new quality, but he persists through that change. So Socrates, that was my example actually, persistence. Socrates persists, he gains some qualities and he loses other ones. So I'm giving you this my example in the wrong order here. It works here for ontologically basic too, because those two qualities, his power and then his tan, both depend on Socrates. If Socrates ceases to exist, his irony, his hardy constitution, and his power all go out of existence as well. And more generally, if all the particular things, all the particular primary substances cease to exist, all the other qualities that they instantiate would cease to exist. So they're ontologically basic in that sense. If primary substances did not exist, neither could any of the other things exist. Epistemically basic. Aristotle says categories 2b, species is more a substance than genus. To say what the primary substance is more informative than to mention secondary substance or genus to which it belongs. So to say of a particular thing that it's Felix, Aristotle means, is more informative than to say of a particular thing that it's a cat or an animal or an organism. Or to say of this entity here that it's Socrates is more informative than to say that it's a man or that it's a human being. So as you go down the genus species schema, as you go from genus to species and move downward, you come to categories that are more informative epistemically. And that's what Aristotle seems to mean in pointing to primary substances as epistemically basic. And then in the example I gave you out of order, these are the things that persist through change. Now, how is this an anti-Platonic treatise? Well, because these are exactly the qualities or the qualifications that according to Plato, are met by the forms, rather than by particular individual entities. So, if you recall, in the Phaedo, for example, when Plato is talking about causes, and he's talking about the safest cause, he says he now accepts the idea, or Socrates there says he now accepts the idea that things that are beautiful through nothing other than the form of the beautiful. The form of the beautiful is the thing that makes particular things beautiful. It's the thing on which their beauty depends. Much more generally, in the Republic, Plato says that the form of goodness, that form that's in some way, some mysterious Platonic sense beyond being, it gives being to all things in the visible realm. These are the things that are in some deep sense the offspring of the form of the good, and they depend on it for its existence. So it's forms that are ontologically basic for Plato. They're epistemically basic too. Remember in the early dialogues, in the Euthyphro, Socrates is after a definition. He wants to know in particular what the eidos, that's the term that Aristotle uses for species, that we translate as species in Aristotle. He wants to know what the eidos of a thing is. And he says to Euthyphro on point, Euthyphro, it's clear that you did not wish to make the nature, the fusis, no, sorry, it's not fusis, it's ousia. You did not wish to make the ousia of piety known to me, because you didn't tell me what the eidos was. You just gave me an inessential quality of piety. So Plato links eidos with ousia. That is, Plato links forms with ousia there in the Euthyphro and in other places. It's forms that you need to know in order to understand what a thing is for Plato. And finally, for Plato, it's the forms that persist through change. Again, in the Phaedo, the particular things, the many particular instances of beauty and whatnot, they come and go. They're in constant flux. But the forms persist through flux. They escape compresence in the jargon of the literature. So you can think of the categories as a treatise in which Aristotle essentially takes Plato's ontology. He takes the things, the qualities that Plato ascribes to forms, and he says, no, in fact, those qualities, those qualifications, those features that are characteristic of substance, of ousiai, are instantiated in the concrete particular things around us that we grasp with our senses. Plato says, no, those are the qualities or the characteristics of the forms. So when you see that marvelous painting by Raphael in the Vatican museums, and you see Plato gesturing upwards and Aristotle gesturing downwards, Plato is gesturing to the forms as the thing that are fundamental. And Aristotle is gesturing to the things that are around us, immanent, and saying that in fact those are fundamental. So that's one sense in which the categories is an anti-Platonic, has an anti-Platonic